Hi, guys. Welcome back to She Speaks Life. I'm Jayme Elizabeth, and today I have with me author Beth Thorp of Anew creation. Beth shares her story about a mysterious illness that began symptoms in her son Mitchell at age 13. In this episode, we talk about Mitchell and his love for baseball, and she talks about the journey of going through the unknowns, pain, and grief, all while learning to stay in faith and stay focused on hope. After the passing of Mitchell at the age of 18, Beth and her husband founded the Mitchell Thorp Foundation, supporting families through life-threatening illnesses and diseases. You can find more info about it at mitchellthorpe.org. This story, although very hard to hear, brings so much hope and encouragement to anyone who's lost a loved one. Here's my guest, Beth Thorp. Hi, Beth. I am so glad you are here. Welcome to She Speaks Life.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
My heart, is heavy from this message and this experience that you went through. But like you were saying before we hit record, that it is the beauty that God made it into after the tragedy. And so I really just want to kick it off with more about who you are. And from there, I'd love to get to know your son, Mitchell, and how it was when he was a child and raising him as a kid.
Awesome. Yes, he was my firstborn, Mitchell, and if I had to describe him, we always called him our sunshine boy because he was so full of joy, so light, so happy. Not only was a beautiful young boy, but inside and out. I remember teachers writing to me after his passing. When Mitchell would walk into the room, he would light up the room. I mean, just things like that. His character, I write about it in the story, and we'll get to that in a minute, how I wrote the book. It took me 13 years to finally see the fingerprints of God through it all for me to get it on paper, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But back to Mitchell, people kept saying, thank you for telling me who Mitchell was, especially for people who didn't know him. So I wanted him to be able to have his voice heard and who he was as a person while he was here on earth. God gave me this beautiful child when we struggled to have children and prayed constantly on my knees, Lord, why can't I get pregnant? Everyone in my family, all my sisters are, and why not me? And so one of those things happened, and God gave me this beautiful child, and I had him for 18 years, and ultimately I had to give him back to him. But he was my warrior son. We call him our warrior son. Just for everything that he had to go through. He'd made me stronger and those who knew our family around us stronger, and brought people closer to God, knowing everything that we had to go through with him.
Well, I see in the background that you have him in his baseball gear, and
Yes.
assuming that he absolutely loved baseball. And one of the things I wanted to mention was you're in Carlsbad, California, which is very close from where I grew up in San Clemente, California. And my brother is the president of Baseball Little League for his kids.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so it's very popular in our family. And so tell me, how did he get into baseball?
Well, my husband was an ex pro ball player. He played for the Los Angeles Dodgers as a left-handed
Oh, okay.
pitcher in the 80s. So that's where his love came from. My husband ended up coaching like in the community here for the Carlsbad youth baseball and La Costa youth baseball leagues. He was in both. And just coached the boys. I have another son too. They were 22 months apart. So there's Mitchell and Matthew. And my husband ended up coaching. And yes, they did, when he got old enough, branched into that whole world of travel baseball. And at the time, Mitchell was developing into really a wonderful 5-tool player. And high school coaches, it's interesting, we're scouting him, I should say, at the age of 10, 11, and 12. And when we came 12 years old, they were like, what high school is he going to? They wanted him at their high school because we had a choice to go to either. We had a choice, but he was a very talented athlete. And I can brag about that because I'm his mom. But when I would stand behind the fence watching him come up to plate, and fathers would be standing there behind, not knowing that I'm his mom, right? And I would hear them say, "Boy, I love to see this kid hit." They loved to see him hit. He was known for that swing. So that is
Yeah.
why that picture on the front of the book was so important. Of baseball runs really thick through our family, and a lot of life lessons in baseball that all these young boys can learn. And my husband brought that to them. And not only that, but also learning how to lose, where to keep your faith, and that was just Mitchell. He was just one of those talented, intelligent boys. He was a 4.0 student, very athletic, but his character again was always looking out for the underdog, and he always would help those that were struggling, because it was a team sport, right? So he wanted always to win. So if the team wasn't doing well, he would do his part to try and help to make the other ball players better. And he just had a heart for that, and uh, for that, I saw that just stepping up as being a little leader, which was really kind of nice to see. And I started, believe it or not, coaching when they were very, very little. I took him to the local YMCA, and he was like 4, almost turning 5, and none of the dads wanted to step up and coach, at that age. So, but
Yeah.
I actually I said, okay, no one's raising their hand, I guess I'll coach. So I coached the boys, they're at that age, and then
Oh,
his father said, I will step up, Mitch, and help you when you get a little older. And so,
yeah.
and he did, and coached him for many years.
Oh, he sounds like an amazing kid.
We hold every year the Grand Slam for Mitchell baseball tournament in the month of September here. And we thought when we first held this tournament that we'd have 20, maybe 30 teams signed up. No, God had a whole different plan. We had 60 travel teams come out for this tournament. It's a 3-day tournament. We hold it in the month of September every year because it's Childhood Cancer Awareness Month in September. So we hold it for that. And it's really wonderful to see children coming out and teaching the young ones. And the coaches even say, thanks so much. All the kids love to play for something bigger than they are. It's more than just baseball, right? There's a
Yeah.
higher purpose.
Mhm. Right. Oh, that's so neat. Okay, so take us back to, I guess, when symptoms started to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Symptoms came on at the age of 13, and he passed at 18. So it was a 5-year, very long, hard journey, taking him in and out of different hospitals and doctors throughout the nation looking for answers. He was ultimately undiagnosed to his death. So go figure. I was just like beyond myself. No one could figure out what was going on. And it was a rude awakening to our medical system, no question. They ran every test, again, in and out of different hospitals. He came home at the age of 13 with a headache, very bad headaches. He says, Mom, I don't know why I'm having these headaches. I don't feel good. So like any mom, you give him a pain reliever, and you thought maybe he's coming down with the flu, and get some rest. And then, to speed up the story, things were progressing and not really getting better. Finally, again, we had to take him back to the hospital when he came home one day and just kind of collapsed on the front yard and cried for me. And I ran out to get him, and my husband swooped him up, and we brought him in the house. Mitchell, what's wrong? What's happening? Tell us what's happening. He says, my pain in my head, pain. And so we took him to the hospital again, and they ran more tests, and things kept coming back negative, normal. But you're like, but he's not. So what's driving this pain? So we were always chasing pain, and before it became chronic. And it was just, when I look back on it, running like crazy, looking for answers, searching for answers, relying on doctors to give you a sign of hope of what to do. And there was none. And then till finally he was in so much pain. And we, again, taking him, this is now years. Now we're going into like the 4th, 5th year of dealing with this with still no answers, but trying to deal with it. He finally ended up in the UCLA Research Hospital. They gave us a choice, Mayo Clinic or UCLA, like a research hospital, because they couldn't figure it out. So we opted for UCLA because it's closer to us, and we were there for a month. And again, their whole doctors and team of people came in and out, and by then he was in myoclonic seizures due to pain. So we're like, what's causing this pain? And more tests were ran. Tests kept coming back negative normal. Then the doctor said, well, it must be all in his head. When you're like, you think my son, well, that really hit my husband's and my buttons. We're like, you think he wants to be like
Oh
this?
yeah.
I'm like,
Oh my
he would,
gosh.
I'm showing
Yeah.
him pictures of him playing baseball. He would rather be out playing baseball with his friends. I said, do what you have to do, but this is not in his head. This is something is going on here that's causing such head pain. Anyway, so you have to there's a whole nother chapter I write in my book about dealing with that. But they did do, I let them do all their studies. And yes, they came back and said, no, it's not in his head. And as any mother, I'm biting my tongue going, right. But on the medical records, they would say, beware of the mother, but, I had to advocate for him because he couldn't speak or talk at the time. And my husband and I are trying to discuss with the doctors, and they brought us in this big conference room and we're chatting with them, like they're telling us we tried this and that, nothing's working. I said, well, have you looked into this and that? Parents go to the ends of the earth. We're doing all the research and I'm in a research hospital. Anyway, but it
Yeah.
was
Oh,
really hard. But at the end of that, I write about it in the book. They wanted to take our son away from us and put him in a psychiatric ward. And we're like, but you
oh
said it
my.
wasn't psychological. He would have surely died in there.
Yeah.
I said, why would you
Yeah.
take that course of action? So parents have to understand. Then we had to, you have to be very careful. I learned we had to get an attorney to help intervene between us and the hospital, because hospitals are very, scared of being sued and whatnot. But um, to get him out of the hospital, because they basically said take him
Yeah.
home and make him comfortable, which basically meant hospice care and palliative care. But we were yet not going to give up on him, and we had to bring a whole team of people into our home. We hired a nutritionist here, an osteopath. We decided to take things a little bit differently, more integrative medicine, since Western medicine couldn't figure it out. And then I had to have a whole team in place before they would release him from the hospital, which was fine because we needed that. We weren't going to give up on him. He left at that time with the good things that came out of the hospital is they broke the myoclonic seizures. They put a G tube in his stomach so we could feed him because he lost the ability to swallow and eat, and he was losing weight at an alarming rate. I had good friends come, and my nutritionist, she created Mitchell's formula. She titled it Mitchell's Formula. They organically juiced everything, and then she had all these vitamins and things. I'll break all these capsules and everything that she would work off his blood work to see what he was deficient in to help build him back up on the cellular level, as well as to put weight back on. The osteopath came into the picture, and things started to make a turn for a little bit of the better. He was the only doctor that said, there is an inflammatory situation happening in his head. My nutritionist wanted him to be tested for Lyme's disease. And I said, Lyme's disease? And back then, see, no one knew anything about that. The tests even back then were not very accurate from what I'm now know and learned. But Lyme's disease is a big disguiser of many things, which the tests don't always show it in blood work and other things that I have now learned over the years, since we are helping other families right now with children going through Lyme's disease, and I see similar symptoms of what they're going through, what Mitchell had. So back then, we're talking, 15 years ago, social media wasn't really around. MySpace was it. So everything had to be done of getting Mitchell's word out was through newspaper and print. And so we were not in a really good place of people understanding. But anyway, he was the only doctor, the osteopath, that had a glimmer of testing of that there's something else going on that's affecting his central nervous system. Not only that, he picked up and detected heavy metals. And we were like, heavy metals? I thought, oh my gosh, did someone poison my son? And then I had myself, my husband, and my other son tested. We were fine, but Mitchell's metals in his system were not. They were abnormal. That was the only thing, a first clue of something was not right. So we had to go through a whole chelation process with him and detox him. And I thought, wow, once those got out of his system, maybe we'll start to see things turn around. But he was the only doctor that helped us get through that and then do some protocols to help get the inflammation down in his head that was causing the pain. But speaking to other people who have suffered from that disease, those are some of the symptoms. And but go figure, back then we were running around the whole United States looking for answers, and not one doctor could figure it out or even help us.
Yeah. Oh man. This is like an unimaginable nightmare for any parent. And just to walk through this, hearing your journey and how you're just navigating, trying to find some kind of solution to his pain. I mean, my heart is breaking, and I just could not imagine. I'm curious, how was your relationship with the Lord during this time period?
Oh yeah, good question. Yes, I'm very faithful. I was um, in my faith, and my husband too. And we've had people praying over him, pastors coming and praying, having Mitchell on everyone's prayer chain. People prayed, and I write about it in the book at that time. God, where are you? Why aren't you answering our prayer? Where are you? Why aren't you healing him? We had people laying hands on him. We were just, I mean, everything we had in our prayer walk. So yes, it tested my faith and my husband's faith to the nth degree, but we never wavered. But yet it got to a point when we came home from that UCLA visit. I mean, I was crying on the park bench outside the hospital. A lady comes up to me and says, "Are you all right?" And I'm like bawling. I says, "No, my son's in this hospital and he's having surgery right now to put that G tube in." And I was just a wreck. You're a basket case walking through it all. And you're reaching out and you're crying at your wits' end. When I finally came home with him, it came to the point where had to totally surrender him. And I was so exhausted from 5 years of, you're like, as a parent, you're in the battlefield, right? Day in and day out, fighting for your child. And it took a toll on my health. I finally fell to my knees and cried and said, "I surrender him, God, to you. I can't do this anymore. You've got to I can't take it. I can't do it," right? You're at that point. Many people can get to that point when they're going through such, but I was hanging on. My husband and I were hanging on like pit bulls. We weren't letting go, trying to help my son. We often prayed, and I had Mitchell in the backyard with me. We'd see butterflies flying around us. I say, Mitchell, one day God's going to heal you and set you free. But in my mind, healing him here on earth, that was the hardest part of the journey. He ultimately did pass at 18. So, and then but while he was alive, which was very interesting, people in this community came out and heard about our situation, and they formed a walkathon. These are some of the very good friends of ours. We are going to help you. We know how much and we had very good insurance, but we still owed over $100,000 out of pocket to that hospital stay. And we're going to do a walkathon for your family. So this was when Mitchell was alive with us, and we came home with that medical bill, and hundreds of people showed up, like 800 people we didn't even know, came out in droves for our family to do a walkathon to help us raise money to help pay off our medical bill, even while we had good insurance.
Yeah, community. I mean, you really, through tragedy like that, you really see people coming together and supporting and helping one another. And you made a foundation in his name. But before we jump into that, I wanted to ask you, so what made you write and publish a book? Was there this, obedience that the Lord was placing on your heart to do?
Well, it took, like I said, it's 13 years now. It took me, it's finally published, but I wanted to get it out on our 10-year anniversary. But it really took COVID-19 to shut everything down, to quiet my world and take all our events, had to cancel, and put me in a space of, it's time. When I heard God speak to my spirit, he said to me, daughter, it's time to write our story. And it's been in my heart for so long. People always said, you need to share your story, all the things that Mitchell was speaking to you beyond the veil of heaven, and how God showed up in so many ways for you that I documented and it's photographed in the book. Um, people kept saying, you need to share your story. You need to tell your stories. You start hearing
Yeah.
that enough. You're like, I know, I need to tell it. I just have to find time to do
Yeah.
it. So it really took
Yeah.
COVID that made me pivot. And I finally,
Right.
when I heard God speak to my spirit, when you hear God speak like that, you move. And I moved.
Yeah. That's for
And I
sure.
just prayed through the Holy Spirit every day to speak through my heart to my mind to my fingers. And everything just kept flowing like rivers of water out of my fingertips. And prior to that, nothing was flowing because, quite frankly, it's all in God's perfect timing. Because prior to that,
Yes.
I wasn't ready. My sister, early on, when 3 years in after Mitchell's passing, she's like, oh my gosh, Mitchell's brought so many people closer to God, even our own family. I can't believe. And all these people that came out for you and to walk for you, and hundreds, and people are drawn to this, drawn to you, drawn to this story. There's something about Mitchell. And I talk about it in the back of the book. It's how the power of one life can cause a ripple effect that goes on and on and on to touch so many others' lives, that draw people closer to the glory of God, which we can actually turn people to know our testimony and how God was faithful through it all, even at times when we felt like he wasn't. So I am a big proponent of faith. And so
Yeah.
that's what started that journey. So it took me 15 months to write it. And another wonderful miracle that was in it was my first book submission, book proposal to the very large publishing house in New York, Morgan James Publishing. And I thought, go big or go home, right? Let me start here. I didn't know where to
Yeah.
go. And,
I love it.
so
Yeah.
they sent me, I have it hanging on my wall as we speak, a congratulations letter. They sent it to me that they like the proposal, that they are wanting to publish the manuscript. And that letter was sent the week of Mitchell's passing. And I just waved that letter to the heavenlies. I was crying. I was like, oh my gosh, God, you do want your story out there through us. And we're just a witness for God of everything that happened along this journey and how we came out of such pain and such tragedy, that the whole process of
Yeah.
going through our healing and restoration that I write about in the book, which is a necessary point for anyone going through trauma or tragedy, is to find someone that you can trust. And in our case, it was our spiritual counselor. I always have to go that route with my faith because I knew there were many things that had to be broken off, my husband and I. Oh, for forgiveness, break off the doctors that couldn't find all the answers, forgiving them, forgiving people who said things that they shouldn't have said, forgiving all that stuff that you're harboring that has to be broken off for you to be set free. And when we went through that healing session, the very next day, my husband and I were a wreck. We were exhausted. But the very next day, it was like we went through the refiner's fire. And I woke up totally transformed and changed. And I told my husband, I don't want to do anything else on this earth unless it has eternal significance. And he looked at me and he said, wow. He says, I feel the same. So we just were totally transformed. Everything we did prior to in our life, I was in the fashion industry. My husband was in sales and marketing for a fitness industry. We gave it up and we started a foundation in Mitchell's honor. And only because when I was in my deepest pain of grief, again, the Lord spoke to my spirit. I'm curled up in a ball, right? He said, this is not the end. This is the beginning. And I kind of shook up. I sat, I said, what do you mean by that? This is not the end. This is the beginning. It feels like it's the end. I don't want to be here anymore. I lost part of my soul, died with my son. And Brad got the same message when he was at the church over here, like 2 days later. And he said, I heard of 2 boys that had Hodgkin's lymphoma and one had non-Hodgkin's, both families struggling to make ends meet. And God spoke to my spirit to form a foundation. We need to form a bridge here to help other families going through what we went through. And he came home and told me, God spoke to my spirit, we need to start a foundation. And I looked at him and said, you want to do what? you want to do what? But then I had to go back and realize what God said to me. This was not the end. This is the beginning. And I thought, okay, well then there we go. We got on our hands and knees and prayed that God is the CEO of this foundation and he's going to show us the way. And here we are 13 years later, giving back $2.6 million and counting back into the community, helping other families and children fighting for their tomorrows.
That's so great. That's wonderful. It's beyond us, right? You start to learn that it's really about others and serving others. And, God just reveals that to us, and it's a beautiful thing. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you leave us with a takeaway? I know I love to ask each guest as we conclude in our episode here of just something that you can leave. Maybe the listener has lost someone, or maybe they're just going through a loss in general, whether it be like a job or a home or a friendship, some relationship. What is some encouragement that you can give them?
Yes. Loss comes in many forms, like you say. And I'm so big of hanging on to your faith. So faith doesn't always take out the problem. Faith takes you through the problem. And faith doesn't always take away the pain, but faith gives you the ability to handle the pain. And faith doesn't always take you out of the storm, but faith calms you in the midst of the storm. So faith is one of the things I write about in the book. It's such an important principle to God that I would say to your listeners, if you feel like you've lost your faith, ask yourself, how strong is my faith? And people will often say that to me. My faith is not as strong as yours. I said, but you can find your faith. And the only way you can find your faith is to get into the Word of God, find a good Bible-based church, find and surround yourself with faith like-minded people to help build you and encourage you along whatever struggle you're going through. And God will take you there. He will speak to you through his word. But I also encourage people to don't get yourself isolated. That's what the enemy wants to do. Keep you isolated and away from others and in your pain. And then if they don't turn to the faith, then they turn to other things to numb the pain, drugs, alcohol. And that's not the answer. God is the answer. He's the only one ultimately who can heal and restore.
Yes, amen to that. Faith pleases God, right? And
Yes.
faith comes by hearing and hearing the word of God. And we've all been given a measure of faith, and faith is essential. Okay, where can people go and get your book, or even just get to know this foundation?
Oh, yes, absolutely. The book just got released, actually, the end of June. It's worldwide, wherever books are sold, online, Amazon. If you want a personal signed autographed copy by me, you can actually go to my website, anewcreation.org. And then there you can see where to buy the book. And I'll sign one for your audience. And the foundation is mitchellthorp.org, and you can find more about what we do to help children, families with children with life-threatening illnesses, diseases, and disorders. And you can learn more about that. And so for your audience, every purchase of the book goes back. The proceeds are going back to the foundation to help another child fighting for their tomorrow. So it's a good read. The people who have read it already have been writing wonderful reviews and saying it's an easy read and so encouraging. And so I would highly recommend it and would love for your readers to read through our journey.
For sure. Well, thank you, Beth, for coming on here and sharing such a tragic, deep experience, and seeing you go through it with God and coming out on the other side with a beauty that only God can do, and to really take the focus off yourself and give it over to other people and serving others, and by glorifying God through it all. It's just, there's so much courage in that, and there's so much inspiration in what you do and your husband after going through something like this. So thank you for sharing your voice and your story, and getting it out there to the masses to help them and build them in their faith, and go, you know what, if I can do it, you can do it. Anything's possible with God.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Beth.
Thank you, Jayme, for having me on. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening today, and I trust that God has encouraged you through this story. Did you know this podcast is on YouTube? Hop on there and subscribe, and you can see a live recording of each episode. And for more information on this ministry and to access free downloads, please visit my website at jaymeelizabeth.com. That's JAYME Elizabeth.com. And let's connect beyond this podcast by going to my Instagram handle, Jayme Elizabeth, She Speaks Life, or Facebook. Until next time, my friend, I hope God reveals himself through your own life story.